Hello and welcome to the first episode of A Journey Through Time, the Darkcast. I'm sitting here with a group of 5 other intrepid co-hosts with the co-most.
Yeah, too kind.
The relationships between all the people at this table is kind of
intertwined
in a very dark-esque fashion. Is very complicated as to how all of us know each other.
Starting it off right, Alex.
I mean, I gotta make connections. Everything's connected. So, to my left we have
Jordan.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Jordan? Jordan Lawton, everybody.
Kind of put me on the spot here.
Well, I mean, people need to know what your voice sounds like. So,
Well, my voice sounds like this, and this is Jordan.
cool. That's all we need to know about you. Moving on.
This is Andrew. I'm the brother.
Brother of me. Did I even introduce myself? My name's Alex Herman. I'm the host of this show. Clearly, I know what I'm doing, obviously.
I'm Andrew. I'm going to pride myself as kind of the skeptic of the show. I have watched many shows that are very good, but don't necessarily fully come through. So
Yes, he's
Sounds like something Donald Trump
he was
would say.
he was he was burned very hard
I've watched
by
many
Game of
great
Thrones.
shows.
yes. Yeah.
We were all burned by Game of Thrones. We're gonna try not to talk about Game of Thrones on this
Hard
podcast, but
Too late.
yeah. Moving on to the next person at our table, we have.
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Colby. Just living in the house. I'm just kind of like a vagabond, just tagging along. But yeah, this is my voice. You can get to know me pretty well over the next couple episodes here.
Silky smooth. Okay. Directly across from me, staring deep into my eyes right now.
Hi, my name is Chris Batistatos, and I have been a dark addict for 3 years now. I plan to learn a lot about myself through this journey, and honestly, Dark might be my favorite TV show of all time, but we'll see how it plays out in season 3. Very excited.
Our final co-host, who may or may not be with us in the future. I'd like to preface it by saying he won't be around ever. Maurice Winter.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Maury. I've seen the show one time. I enjoyed it very much. And for those of you who are like maybe have seen it once and are listening to the podcast to kind of like get jazzed up for the 3rd season, I'm kind of right there with you.
Also, this podcast will be heavy spoilers for seasons 1 and 2. It's mostly a recap of seasons 1 and 2 with theorizing for what will occur in season 3. So if you have not seen seasons 1 and 2 of Dark, I would recommend turning this podcast off. In fact, we may have already spoiled things for you. I do not remember.
Tell your friends.
GTFO.
Tell your friends if they've
And
seen
then
it.
if they don't mind spoilers,
Don't leave us hanging.
Yeah, I mean, come on, guys. What are we even doing here?
also pay me.
That's gonna get cut.
yeah, that's not going to be in the podcast. I'm sorry.
I'll get it in there another
Maury, we're just going to cut everything that you've said in the
My
entire
mic's not
show.
even plugged in.
Okay, so I think what we're gonna do to start this is do a quick rundown maybe of each episode in the first season and just kind of chit chat as we go. If you guys have any thoughts or theories or ideas, anything that sticks out to you in the first episode, I'm just gonna read a quick recap and we'll, if you have anything, chime in, please. Okay, so episode 1, Secrets, Geheimnisse. Gesundheit, please. So, episode 1 of Dark opens June 21st, 2019, which coincidentally was the release date of the 2nd season. Everything's connected. The episode opens with the suicide of Michael Kahnwald, the father of Jonas Kahnwald. He left a suicide note not to be opened before November 4th, 2019 at 10:13 p.m.
It also starts with a quote from Albert Einstein saying,
Yes.
"The distinction between past, present, and future is a stubbornly persistent illusion."
Yes, so that kind of lays the groundwork for time's going to be fucky in this show. So after the suicide of Michael and the zoom in on his suicide note, we cut to his son, Jonas Kahnwald, waking up kind of aggressively and breathing very heavily, seemingly waking from a nightmare. We see him riding his bike through the picturesque town of Winden. We see lots of forest imagery, and there's tons of drone shots overhead of forests to really set the stage.
One of the best parts about the entire series are those drone shots. Yeah.
Well, that's actually a big Goethe theme in a lot of his writing, because Goethe is like one of the greatest German poets, like Renaissance man. He's essentially like the Da Vinci of Germany, or like the Shakespeare of Germany, maybe, I don't know. But a lot of his writing involves like there are like palate cleanser breaks where there's lots of like introduction to nature and like being around nature, and the idea of nature as like a salve to being like, so to calming the soul kind of thing. Is a consistent theme. So like anytime you see one of those drone shots, it's kind of like a Goethe-esque reset of like palate cleanser almost.
Oh, very nice. And honestly, when you're viewing those cutscenes, you do get a moment to breathe. You do get a moment to kind of take in what you just experienced.
Because all the scenes are so dense and heavy, and they really don't hold your hand at all. So you're basically, it's a show where you have to actively be watching and really paying attention.
Well, I mean, because already just from what we've seen so far there's the letter that says don't open until X amount of time, and then we see Jonas's mom hooking up with someone. There's already familiar stuff where we saw one picture in the art studio before the guy killed himself of a family, and then we see another one with one of the people ripped out of it. So I mean, there's already a lot of stuff that we see. We see a missing sign for a kid.
Yeah, there's lots of heavy introductions to characters without holding your hand as to who they are or how they're related to anybody else. Yeah, you start with a suicide by hanging of Michael Kahnwald, and immediately the next thing we see is Ulrich Nielsen and Hannah Kahnwald making sweet love. And don't like that? There's a shake of the head over there. But yes, so you kind of, the way that the show is introduced to you, you don't find out immediately, but Ulrich Nielsen, after making love to Hannah, she says that she loves him, and he says that she's beautiful. He does not return the I love you to her. And then he climbs out the window and runs back home to his wife and 3 children. And so you find out kind of the first 2 scenes that you get of the show are a man killing himself and then a man cheating on his wife and family. And so you're kind of introduced to this murky, like, there's no, all the morality of this world is maybe a little bit askew. Everybody is kind of,
I think right from the get-go, you start developing a negative image of Ulrich.
one could say dark.
But I wouldn't.
You wouldn't, though?
No.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, we also see, like, the next thing we see is Jonas talking with his friend Bartosz.
Well, he talks to his therapist first, right?
Oh, okay. Well, we skip. Oh,
I did kind of skip that originally, but he does go and talk to his therapist.
With his therapy session in the woods, like, that's weird.
Yeah, they are kind of just walking through the woods before school. It's kind of an interesting time for a therapy session, but who knows what Peter Doppler is up to. And Jonas basically, in his meeting with his psychiatrist, this is when you find out that he went to, after the suicide of his father, he checked himself into a mental hospital in Frankfurt. Is that where he was? Do they say where specifically he went?
It doesn't say specifically.
Maybe I'm just thinking Frankreich as Germany, and so I'm thinking Frankfurt, or as France, I'm sorry. Because he basically, Bartosz lies for him to his friends and says that he went to visit France for the, 3 months, 6 months that he was gone?
Because it's December.
The whole summer. Well, it's November when we start.
November. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that Jonas doesn't know about the suicide note when he meets with his psychiatrist.
No.
Either.
Well, because we find out also that the suicide note is at the woman at Ines Kahnwald, who is in the family photo with them, who's the grandmother of Jonas.
Yes, mother of Michael.
We see that the suicide note is actually in her house. And we also hear on the radio that the nuclear plant has a history of failure-free operations, and they're the best in Germany.
Yes, one of the oldest power plants in Germany without an accident. The oldest accident-free power plant in Germany is, I think, the way that it's phrased.
Oh, I listen to the English dubbing because I'm too lazy to read captions.
Oh, you're the worst.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
How dare you.
So some of the translations are not always the same.
So what is Ina's reading out of the box at the end, towards the end of episode 1? When she reads that note.
She reads the suicide letter from Michael.
That's the suicide letter.
Yes.
Okay.
And then she puts it back in her little box.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because Jonas doesn't actually see the suicide letter until later on.
Yeah.
She reads the letter for the first time when it at
Yeah,
date
she's the one who holds on to it, which how she got it, who knows? Because we assume that
Oh, true.
we assume that Michael commits suicide on June 21st, 2019. And skipping forward to season 2, we know that Jonas and Hannah are out of the house that night at Katerina and Ulrich's anniversary party.
Mm-hmm.
So you would think that them coming home from that party, they would find Michael's dead body, they would find the suicide note. Yet Ines Convald has the suicide note and keeps it from Jonas for 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, however many months.
I think it's just a month.
What is June to September or June to November?
Oh, I guess she has the note. She just doesn't open it until the date. Yeah, so she keeps from 6 months, for about 6-7 months.
Easily could have placed it in her possession though,
Or mailed it to her.
Or something.
Well, we see him set it on his desk and then go and hang himself
that's right.
immediately.
That's it.
Well, and Jonas was the one who found him too. So
Is that true? Is that established?
I think they mentioned that somewhere, but maybe
I don't know. I don't remember if that is established. I don't really know.
That might be true.
The
I thought that the only time that he saw his father was after he died, obviously, was when he was covered in like that black substance in the
Right.
woods
that might be
when
true.
Mikkel
His vision.
goes missing.
right,
Yeah.
which he
I don't know
he
if he
hallucinates
sees
his
him.
father
Yeah, I'm
several
not sure.
times.
Yeah, maybe it's something like that.
I would say like let's just introduce the characters. Just be like, hey, here's who we know, like, and then
Yeah, we should
You know.
introduce Ulrich and his family and introduce their kid. Ulrich Nielsen is having an affair with Hannah Convald, Jonas's mother. Ulrich Nielsen's current wife is Katerina, who is the principal of the high school that all of the children in Winden go to. It seems to be the school in Winden, so that is where all of the children go. Katerina is the principal. The children of Ulrich and Katerina are Marta, Magnus, and Mikkel. They're big with the M names. Jonas is close friends with Marta and Magnus. I guess Mikkel's a little younger, but they seem to have a friendly relationship. They know each other. They have a couple other friends in their group. Well, I guess Bartosz is really their main friend. Franziska Doppler is another friend who seems to be more on the outside edges of their friendship. I don't know that she's really...
yeah. At the beginning, I wouldn't even consider them friends. It's not
No.
until Magnus at
She's
a
the
later
new
date.
girl in school, right?
Is she new?
No, I don't
No.
believe so.
They've
No.
grown up there together.
Yep.
I mean,
I mean,
because
yeah.
she's the child of Charlotte and
Yep.
That's true.
Franziska is the daughter of Peter Doppler, who is Jonas's therapist.
Therapist and husband to Charlotte, who is the
Part-
chief of police.
And partner. Well, yeah, I guess yeah, she's the chief technically, so Ulrich is below her, I guess,
Yeah.
on the pecking order.
But we'll meet those characters in just a couple of episodes, or if not episode 1, I think actually.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're first introduced to all these characters. Like Mikkel is talking about magic that he loves. Marta's doing a hunger strike for starving kids.
Right.
It kind of gives their personalities. Magnus is looking for a jacket and like constantly like
Kind of look
Yeah.
like a everyday happy family,
Mm.
but the father's secretly in an affair with, somebody who lives right down the road.
That scene is actually a really fantastic scene. It's all done in one shot.
Yeah.
It's a one take basically, and it does like a full circle around the room and kind of follows all the characters and introduces the Nielsen family in a really like focused way. Kind of gives you an idea of who all these characters are. Marta being the actress and like socially conscious girl.
Katerina's like she's like running the family.
She's
Yeah,
the
as the
principal,
principal,
She's trying to
exactly.
keep everything
Yeah.
ordered.
Well, and it's interesting too because the first time we get introduced to Franziska, she's smoking a joint, or she takes a joint from Magnus, who's smoking, and it's kind of an interesting interaction between them because it kind of shows that she's on the outskirts. And we later learn that her mom's the head detective, Charlotte.
She smokes
Stockman.
weed, ladies and gentlemen.
Well,
She's
that was
on the outskirts.
That was a power move too, taking the J from him.
Yeah.
The way that she walks up, her whole like demeanor, you can just tell.
And that kind of gives us her personality as well.
Exactly.
She's very straightforward and upfront with people.
Yeah.
Mikkel, first time you meet Mikkel, he's doing magic.
Heavy Mikkel in this.
Talking
in
about
this
Pulling a
scene.
rabbit out of a
Well,
hat.
and he literally the
Yeah.
first question he asks after doing a magic trick with his dad, he says the question isn't how, the question is when, and that's
Right.
a very prevalent theme.
The
throughout
scene
entire
is heavy.
show.
He's wearing a black like onesie essentially that is just a skeleton
Yes.
with a skeleton design on it.
Like a silhouette
And then
of
he's
black,
wearing
yeah.
a red jacket over top of that, and he's wearing a black top hat as well. And Katerina is trying to get him to change because he can't go to school like that, and he's saying that this is my work outfit. A magician has to have like his setup and whatever, and that he is emulating Houdini. And his mother doesn't seem to understand his love for magic, but he's very adamant, and his father is much more supportive. Ulrich actively encourages him, fine, you can dress like that, just show me a trick and then get going because you guys got to get to school. And he does the sugar cube, or the not the sugar cube, it's the like little
yellow
parcheesi
wooden
piece.
thing,
It's a yellow parcheesi piece, thank you. And he puts it under a yellow cup, and he also upturns a blue cup, and he taps the top of both cups, and when he lifts them, the yellow parcheesi piece has changed from the yellow cup to the blue cup. And so there's a lot of heavy color symbolism in this scene, and I think it will lead us to some future theories and conclusions that I personally have. I don't know, do you guys want to get into that now, or should we should just wait and move on for that?
Yeah, let's just move on. So as we were saying, Jonas shows up at school and clearly is friends with Martha, Magnus, Bartosz.
Bartosz seems to be his closest friend.
We also find out that Bartosz and Martha are dating, and that kind of surprises Jonas.
Yep, definitely surprises Jonas. Martha seems visibly like concerned or very worried about Jonas's feelings on the subject. And Jonas seems to be taking it in full stride. Definitely, doesn't want to admit the fact that he was going to like psychotherapy for a couple months. Bartosz really did him a solid for telling everybody he was in France. And so, yeah, they go to school, they're hanging out, and then I believe we're introduced to Charlotte through Ulrich.
Yeah,
right?
Ulrich and Charlotte are discussing the missing child poster that we saw earlier. Yep. And there's an allusion to something that happened in Ulrich's past being a similarity or something, but he kind of brushes it off.
Yeah, she says that when they discuss Eric going missing and the fact that a child has gone missing, Charlotte brings up that things seem kind of similar to what happened 33 years ago, and Ulrich says, this has nothing to do with my brother, and then kind of storms out a little bit. He gets up and leaves, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I believe at the same time we're also introduced to Voller. If it's not that scene, it's definitely a scene very soon after. I just felt the need to bring him into the picture because he has an eye patch.
What happened to his eye?
Never gets explained. I wonder if season 3 will bring the true reason we all watch Dark to know why he has the eye patch.
I think
His eye is why the alternate world exists.
I'm pretty sure that the black hole that's causing all of this exists inside of Voller's eye.
He has a time machine behind his eye patch. That's how far into the future he's been.
I believe it.
The next person we're introduced to is Regina Tiedemann.
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 And it seems like she's some type of receptionist at a hotel, and
I believe she just like runs the hotel essentially. I think it's just a one-person operation basically.
At this point in time, it's you're not really sure who this lady is, but it's clearly she runs it and she's by herself.
And she gets a phone call from the bank that says like, "Hey, we
need you to pay back the loans that you owe us." And she's saying, "Look, kids have gone missing in our town. Nobody wants to come and visit our town right now while there are children missing.
Understandably,
obviously, I can't afford to pay you back right now. Can we defer payments?" And then kind of gets very angry and screams at them and seems visibly like shaken and upset.
So back to the school scene real quick. Isn't at that point we learn that Eric is missing?
Yes, the school scene in the scene where Jonas and Bartosz are sitting next to each other. Bartosz, in fact, says that these kind of assemblies are for idiots and they should get rid of them, which I'm kind of interested to know who the they are, but I assume it's probably just the powers that be. I also noticed that there were like a lot of people standing in the back row of the thing in black, but when I paused it and went back, I was like, ooh, is there like a Sigmundus like cult running this school? But then when I went back, it was just a bunch of kids standing in the back, and I was like, oh, fuck. But
That would be a great story.
it would have been really cool, but it's not the thing.
And I can't believe we haven't talked about Helge yet.
Ooh, old man Helga.
So Helge...
we just see scenes of him just where it says it's happening or
Yeah,
it's going to happen again.
How creepy is that? I mean, you have this old man who everybody thinks is crazy saying...
Has dementia.
He has dementia, and he's saying it's going to happen again. Like, am I too late? Has it already happened? TikTok. And everybody's like, man, what the fuck is Helge
But he's like a significant piece to this whole machine that's running.
Little do they know, Jordan, right?
Yeah.
Man, and Helge, when you first meet him, you also are led to believe he is just crazy, insane old guy who doesn't know what he's talking about, right? But sure enough, he turns out to be the number one figure in terms of like knowing what's going to happen almost in the entire series.
And he's been to each timeline that we know of, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I think he's the only one who's been to
Obviously, at this time, there's no way to know that, but...
Right. There's also kind of an interesting theme of like people having people that are relevant or important, or people that have like some kind of disability that is like half of a disability, like the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. You have Helga with a battered ear, but only one of them. Voller only has one eye wounded, and Elizabeth can't speak, but she can speak with sign language. So they're all like kind of a halfway to the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, which is kind of an interesting like symbolism to include in the show.
I'm sorry. Can you? So you were talking about Helge, Elizabeth, and who's the third?
Voller, just because he's missing an eye.
Wow, and honestly,
I didn't put that together either.
I've always thought Voller's like just going to be an outskirt kind of comedic relief character with his eye patch thing.
Everyone in the story is connected.
But the thing is, Voller is super important to the story. I mean, he's working for Alexander and the power plant. He's like a mole in the police office.
I don't know if we've introduced him. Alexander is the head of the nuclear power plant.
And the wife and the husband to.
Oh yeah. Speaking of, the town of Winden is. Basically, the lifeblood of the entire town is a power plant that employs the vast majority of the people that live in the town.
Power plant.
It's a nuclear power plant. Yes.
Yeah. Built in the 80s. No,
50s.
Built in 60.
The power plant was built in.
It was built in 1960.
It started the construction in 1953.
Yes.
So essentially, Bartosz kind of. While they're at school, he's talking to Jonas, or maybe they were playing video games.
You did skip over the 80s music, which was "You Spin Me Right Round," which I really liked. But it shows the bunker that the missing kid is in, which we'll talk about later.
I think that's the very end.
That's the last scene.
It shows it earlier.
It might show it earlier, actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
He's like laying in the bed, but I mean, we don't know what it is. Again, it's keeping us in the dark.
That's a good point, Andrew. It shows us all of a sudden.
The show has a lot of cut scenes. Like it just shows you one little thing, then jumps to something else.
So all of a sudden, you're watching kind of this immoral universe unfold. We're watching this kind of immoral town unfold in episode 1, and then there's a cut scene to very loud 80s music. Andrew, what's the song?
You Spin Me Right Round.
You Spin Me... Oh, wow.
You Spin Me Right Round.
And it's loud.
English, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes, it is American.
You can. I think you can see the dancers.
Yeah, you can see it on.
Yeah, it's like the music
TV.
video
you can see
of
those 80s spandex wearing motherfuckers
The
playing
TV,
around.
The TV is also. Was it 80s? No.
It must have been. It was
the whole
down.
bunker
Was
is.
80s.
You don't know, but everything is
Yeah.
that whole
Yeah.
bunker is in the 80s.
So the terrifying cutscene happens. It's maybe like a 30-second clip, if that, and then no explanation. We get cut back to school or it's either
it's school.
or
Well, the machine closes around his head.
No,
No,
that's the end of the
That's
episode.
right.
We actually
Yeah.
see the chair just
That's
sitting in the
what-
room while he's
And
laying on
he's
the
just
bed
like
first.
sleeping on the bed.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
that's all it shows. Yeah, it shows the cutscene at the end.
But I think it shows the wallpaper at that point, which is like one of my favorite
The
little
wallpaper
tiny
was
series.
fantastic.
I want that wallpaper.
I think Bartosz asks Jonas to find some drugs.
Yeah, Eric.
Yes.
Said
Well,
that
he
stashed his
first
weed.
he has a hilarious black hole asshole joke about Franziska
Oh,
because
yeah.
she's up presenting something for whatever science class they're in, and she's talking about black holes, and Bartosz leans over and goes, "I bet you the biggest black hole of all is in Franziska's ass." And
Oh, that's hilarious.
Jonas laughs
I
his
don't remember
ass
that
off.
joke, yeah.
They laugh so hard, it's great. And then Bartosz goes, "But seriously, since Eric's missing, I bet you all of his drugs are still
Yeah.
at the cave."
Yeah, boom.
It kind of starts showing Bartosz not being the best person.
Yeah, he's an
'Cause
unsavory character.
The first
I mean,
three
he's kind
things
of
we
just
see
a
about
shitty
him is
kid.
that he is dating some girl that Jonas clearly likes. He's talking about some girl's asshole being a black hole and wants to steal drugs from the local drug dealer. So
Yes.
Just going through a phase.
I feel like that's just natural like kid behavior, right?
Yeah, that is.
It doesn't label him as necessarily
school's-
like
The ironic thing is
evil
that
at this point.
his parents are probably the most loving couple in the show, the best
Oh yeah.
most cohesive family unit, and yet he's like kind of the shittiest, most like incorrigible kid of all the kids that we've been introduced to.
It's true.
So they end up, making a pact that they're gonna go find the drugs. I believe. Bartosz
After
and-
they leave the class,
Yeah.
Bartosz and
And
Jonas introduce this idea to
Yeah.
Magnus and Marta,
And someone else overhears.
which I do find suspicious that
Yeah.
Franziska says that she overheard them talking about it, because we see where she is in the school during this scene, because we're following our group of four, Jonas, Bartosz, Magnus, and Marta, as they walk down the stairs and discuss the prospect of going to the caves. And as they cross through a door, Franziska is coming from the other side of the door, and Franziska and Magnus have their like little stare at each other and say each other's names, which is super hot flirting.
Yeah. Whether she overheard or knew that it would be there as well, not
That's my
So
thing, is I'm not sure if she overheard because they were talking about it on the stairs
Yeah.
and she didn't cross their path
if
until
she didn't overhear, so
the
what?
door.
Like she knew it was there, right?
maybe.
But nevertheless, she is there.
She does seem
is,
to
yeah,
be.
they go
She
to
does
pick up
seem
the
to be a
drugs.
weed smoker. So
She is. She shows.
She's shown herself to be.
while Bartosz, Jonas, Magnus, and Marta and Mikkel are all there as well, and it's nighttime, and it's this spooky-looking cave that, spoilers, is going to be very important throughout the entire show.
And the only reason that Mikkel is there is because
the babysitter had a stomach
Right.
bug, and Ulrich. Oh man. Okay. So Ulrich seems to have told his family that he has to go to Frankfurt for some kind of police training, because when he's on the phone with Hannah, she gives him shit for having to call her with not even a full day after they've made love. She says, "Oh, you can't even make it a full day without me, huh?" And he says, "I need you," or whatever. And he mentions that he'll be in Frankfurt this weekend and he has a hotel if she's interested. Now, if we remember the scene where Regina is on the phone in the hotel, there is a key missing. So the theory is that Ulrich has checked into the hotel and lied to his family so that he can have Hannah over and continue their affair. And that same night is the night that his son goes missing.
Yeah. Which son, you ask? You already know. It's Mikkel.
Come on. Houdini, of course.
Mikkel pulls a disappearing act at the cave. Literally, the group of 5 meet Franziska, who's in the cave. She comes out with the drugs. Bartosz pushes her over, says, "Get out of here, bitch. Give me the drugs."
Essentially. Says, "I'll give you a swift kick in the ass."
yeah, whatever. Yeah, something like that. Really good guy, Bartosz.
Oh, he's great. Shoving
then-
ladies and stealing drugs.
All of a sudden, their flashlights start flickering and the cave makes a loud noise.
The loud noise actually comes first, and then the lights start flickering.
It's like a long
fact,
groaning noise.
What happens is there's a loud sound, kind of like a blaring horn, or like there's a wind aspect to it as well, which is interesting. and then the group of kids hear a sound in the woods off to their left, and they all turn left and point their lights at it. And then they hear another sound behind them, and they all turn around and point their lights behind them. And then they turn back to the cave, and then their lights start flickering.
Looking the other way and flashing the lights the other way gives somebody an opportunity to maybe walk out of the cave unseen.
That, or there are multiple people watching them at this cave as some kind of point of inflection that is a very...
Because Mikkel disappears as they're running away from the cave.
Right.
Like he disappears in the outlying forest, running away.
Yes. After their lights start flickering and these sounds happen, they are all sufficiently freaked out and sprint out of the cave back to where they came from.
Just dart in every direction.
Yes, they all split up essentially, and
Idiots.
Mikkel is initially with Jonas.
Mikkel and Jonas
and
are
the other
together.
three run the other way.
Yes.
I also find it interesting that earlier on in this conversation, Jonas says, just as like an overarching kind of theme, Michael, his dad, used to say, "Good and evil is a matter of perspective."
I wrote that
which I
down
think
as
is
well.
really interesting because
Who
that
said
kind
that?
Jonas
said
says that Michael used to say it a lot, which is an interesting thing because it kind of lays the groundwork for the entire show.
If you buy into a larger theory that I have, that statement could be very interesting. But
We'll get more on that.
Yeah,
later.
well, in fact, even before they get to the cave, Jonas has a very intimate conversation with Marta before the rest of the kids show up, because he gets there early and Marta's already there.
Under the bridge.
They have a deja vu conversation.
Yes,
and
Marta says the lights and the way that the night is right now, it's giving me deja vu, and Jonas says, "Oh well, some people say deja vu is like a glitch in the Matrix. If the world is a simulation, then deja vu is a glitch in the Matrix." Eine Fehler in der Matrix. After Jonas says his glitch in the Matrix line, Marta says, "Or it's a message from the other side. I read that somewhere." And then Magnus and Mikkel show up.
And they go to the cave, and
That's some deep stuff right there.
just in the first
There's
episode,
so much in the first episode
Yeah.
that plays out later
I don't
on.
even think that's the end of the episode.
No,
right?
no, no.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
that's-
we keep seeing Helga
About
like
three-fourths
being
of the way through.
distressed,
Yeah.
and he's yelling, "It's too late to stop
He
it."
interrupts
As
a school meeting that's about
PTA meeting,
Eric
essentially.
being missing, and he's like, "Oh, did it happen? I'm too late." And you see Charlotte stand up and be like, "Papa, no, what are you doing? You're crazy. Go back to the nursing home, Papa." Little do they know, right? So anyway, yeah, you have Helga coming in screaming, "Am I too late? Did it already happen? It must have already happened."
Once they get outside and it starts raining, he says, "We're too
We're
late."
too late.
And it starts raining. Well, it starts raining while they're running through the forest. As Mikkel and Jonas, because Magnus, Bartosz, and Marta and Franziska all split off of Jonas and Mikkel. Jonas falls down in the woods.
Which I find also weird. Why is Jonas the one who's supposed to grab Mikkel? Why didn't
I agree.
Chaos.
Yeah, it was just full chaos, and his siblings ditched him because they suck.
Yeah, that
Pretty
was kind of
much.
a dick move.
But we see Jonas fall and lose sight of Mikkel, and when he stands up, he hears a noise. It's like quiet around him. He doesn't see Mikkel, and he hears a noise, and he turns around slowly, and he sees his father Michael, his dead father Michael, standing in front of him, covered in what seems to be black paint, maybe black paint from his studio.
This is key, I believe, to the entire series. Is that scene right there?
Mikkel's Jonas's hallucination. Hallucinations.
Yeah, I don't know
quotes.
if it's a hallucination.
Who
exactly,
knows?
Alex. Yeah, I think very, very real chance that it was a real vision. He saw his father. Yeah.
It's possible. We did hear people standing around in the woods making noises. So right after that, Jonas can't find Mikkel. He runs to meet his friends.
Yeah.
This is when monsoon season in Germany starts, apparently, because it's just absolutely pouring rain, and
It's raining sideways.
it's
for
insane.
the next 4 months?
It's bananas how hard it rains and how frequently it rains in this town. But
Their budget for
And then
rain
af-
machines was
yeah,
And then
through the roof.
after they lose Mikkel, we see Inez reads the letter because it goes to the time that she was supposed to open that
10:13?
November 4th.
yes,
10,
and so
13
we
letter.
realize that the time of
what that
this
letter.
thing happening with the cave and Mikkel disappearing corresponds to the time that she's reading the letter.
And all the
we don't know
parents-
what's in the letter.
Yeah.
We just know that it corresponds to this time of.
Well, at that point in time, we
At
don't.
that point,
but
we don't.
we
know that
she's
this
reading
letter
the
is
suicide.
the suicide letter from Michael.
So there's some connection there, and we know what the
Yes.
connection.
And then
is.
all the parents get called and like run through.
Ooh,
the
there's
woods
a
looking
great
for
phone call
Conundrum.
montage there. Everybody, each person getting a phone call, and that's when you kind of realize that scene right there is when you realize how all these characters are connected with all the family units.
Yeah.
It's great because you see Hannah run up and hug Jonas, so you know they're connected, even though you kind of already knew that one. You see Katerina run up to Magnus and Marta. You see Charlotte hugging Franziska, and you see Regina Tiedemann hugging Bartosz. And so you understand these family units in a general sense.
And I
You
like that
understand
too.
people's desires almost. you
But
know?
I also think that it shows us how small Wyndon actually really is.
Yeah.
At
these
least-
are the main families.
Yeah, they are the ones with history
They're
in
like
this
the
town.
founding four
supposedly.
houses.
They're the police. They're the nuclear power plant.
The hotel
Yeah.
and the principal of the school,
Exactly. I mean, it's every facet of this.
and a therapist as well.
Yeah, kind of sucks. But
Well, we also find out that the therapist Peter calls his wife saying that he really needs to tell her something, but she is busy with the obvious kidnapping or
Right. He
disappearance.
seems very distraught, and
honestly, like, why is he so distraught? Is it because he knows what's going to happen because of the book that Claudia ends up giving him?
because he found Mads that same night.
yeah,
That same night was the night that Mads comes through the bunker.
Which is the other thing that happens in this episode. We find a child's body, which is
Yes.
presumably Mikkel's, but it ends up being Mads with the burnt eyes.
But we
and
don't.
the
Mads
AIDS
That's
is-
clothes.
season 2 material right
Yeah.
there, where we see.
Mads is Ulrich's
that-
brother.
Yeah, and so
back
that's
in
that same day. So there's the
80s.
connection in time between a season 1 episode and a season 2 episode.
Yes.
Is essentially them finding the body and Claudia telling them they have to dispose of it.
Is that happen at the? Is
I
that
think
the
that's
last
the end of
episode of
season
season one?
one.
I
That's
think
the
that's in
last-
the last episode of season
we
one
find
that
that
Claudia
out.
comes into the bunker and
Oh,
talks to
really?
Tranta
Okay.
and Peter, because that's why Peter is so like emotionally distraught.
For the
You
whole
assume
first
that
season.
you assume for a lot of it that it's the
Cheating
secret
on
the
her
secret of him being gay and not telling his
Yes.
wife, and the cheating that she knows about, obviously. And so you assume that's the thing that's torturing him, and that he's constantly saying what's that called, something prayer,
Yeah, help me to.
the
serenity.
grant me the serenity
serenity
to
to-
accept the things I can't
Yeah.
change, and which is
Right.
fantastic. The whole thing about what you can and can't change is an interesting
Can
prayer
change-
for him
yeah,
to say.
change nothing.
Well, and then the last scene we get is a scene of the Eric missing boy in that 80s music playing, and he's in some tied up machine.
The time machine chair.
Right.
Oh, I wanted to mention one more thing about episode 1.
Yeah.
The time 11:05 plays a big part in the first season.
Go on.
Really, just in the show in general, 11:05 I think is used to symbolize the approaching of the apocalypse, with midnight being the apocalypse, and both hands of the clock are equidistant from midnight and ticking down to like the doomsday clock of apocalypse. And this is borne out actually in episode 1 at 11:05 in the episode. Ulrich is saying to his family, the apocalypse is upon us, because like everybody was at the bakery getting bakery foods.
That's right.
He was explaining why he was late, which he was really cheating on his wife, but it's at 11:05 in the first episode he says the word apocalypse, which is fun. I had a couple other
Like
notes
notes of
actually.
findings.
Yeah.
All three Nielsen's are wearing red when they go to the cave, which is interesting. Hannah works as like a physical therapist, masseuse essentially, and she goes to the power plant to, I guess, Alexander Tiedemann, who is the head of the power plant, is one of her clients, I guess, and she's massaging seemingly a bullet wound in his back, and she says scars can see into the future, like that he knew it was going to rain because his back was tightening up, and she says scars can see into the future. So that's fun because people
Yeah.
like Adam are scarred as fuck.
He also references moving there 33 years ago.
Yes, and that that everything is going to come to an end in a year or 6 months or whatever he says, because the power plant will be shutting down soon.
Interesting about that scar too, that because we don't know anything about his backstory.
We don't know why he was shot when
We
he
know,
comes
yeah,
in.
we know he was most likely shot by the police for running away. However, Interesting that it's like they can. What was it? What was the exact quote? Scars can see into the future.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's fun.
Was he shot in the future, or
Yeah, there's a lot of mystery surrounding how Alexander gets to.
Right.
It was interesting in that scene that he wasn't really that heavily pursued. You would think that if he had just run away, he couldn't have been shot for
You mean the
that
scene
long.
when he emerges from the woods?
Yeah. It's surprising
Although
that
there are dogs barking and sirens when he's running through the woods. Which
but
is
I'm saying that he
Also, that's later in. Is that season
1?
That's all season. It's season 1,
It's
but
season
it's like
1.
it's like episode 5 maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so episode 2 begins with the title card 9 hours after Mikkel's disappearance. So it's the morning after November 4th. It's November 5th currently. We're introduced to the stranger, which is the older version of Jonas, and he's very dirty and disheveled. He's wearing a dark blue jacket, and he is carrying a brown suitcase that is carrying the time machine. He picks up a dead bird, which is very similar to several other people throughout the show. It's echoed by Charlotte and by Helga, just looking at dead birds. And then we cut to Jonas waking up again, bolting upright. Well, we see him start leaking black fluid out of his ear, and he goes to the mirror to look at it, and then he has a very similar hallucination to the night that Mikkel disappeared last night, and he turns to the left and sees his father again covered in the black fluid, whether it's paint or dark matter, who knows. But it'd be interesting if it was dark matter and it scarred him up real bad.
Yeah.
I think
It
it
really
is.
fit.
I think it is dark matter, but
Yeah. But
yeah.
And so then as he's seeing his father hallucinating again, he then jolts awake again, and you realize that he was having a nightmare.
Yeah, it almost makes you think he when he woke up, he experienced all that, and then he woke up again.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it really throws you for a loop.
Yeah.
We're then thrown to the coroner, who talks about the child that was found in the woods, with the eardrums melted and burnt face and damage completely shattered from loud sound, pressure, or centrifugal force.
Yes. So the idea of him being spun right round in the bunker chair, and that causing his ears to get all fucked up.
Right. This is at this point this is Eric that they found, or did they?
That was
this is
Mads.
They found
Mads.
Mads.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Eric is found later outside of the quarry or something like that. with
I'm actually
another-
interested to know if Mads and Eric were in the bunker at the same time, because there's a bunk bed in that room, and we don't see the top bunk when they show us Eric sitting in the bed, and we know that Mads dies first, so maybe they're both in the room at the same time.
So
Wait, that's completely different time frames, though, right?
No,
They're both in the
it's
80s.
both
The bunker
1986.
exists in the 80s,
They're
Yeah,
both
Eric,
in the 80s.
Eric
there?
was taken back by Helga.
presumably,
Yeah, that's how we.
or Noah. I mean, they did the same thing to Jonas, right? They chloroformed him and then just
took him back.
and then when he wakes up, he's in the
Right, and he's speaking to the older version of himself,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So anytime you see that bunker with the wallpaper, it's like necessarily 1986.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we see the bunker in 53 and we see the bunker in 2019, and
And they look totally different.
they're just
Yeah. Yeah.
abandoned.
Right.
Except for the little piece of wallpaper.
Look at the wallpaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Easter egg for you.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Ulrich is kind of like running around town trying to find Mikkel because he's disappeared. He's searching the caves, and he's starting to think that it's kind of similar to his brother's disappearance.
He also
Yeah,
finds the
the-
metal biohazard door
Welded-
inside the cave while
welded
climbing.
shut.
Yeah, welded shut underneath the caves.
But
There's
more
actually a
test
fun
one, two,
little
test
parallel
one, two.
when Ulrich is in the cave. He slips and falls in the exact same spot that Mikkel slips and falls, and he puts his hand on the same rock when he's climbing up out of the little
Nice
divot
little
that he falls down
parallelism
on.
right there.
Yeah. But he finds the door with the radioactive symbol on it that's welded shut, and he basically tries to get into the power plant, and Alexander, who runs the power plant, says basically you have to get a search warrant. I can't just let people walk onto the. I know that he's not here. Our security guards would have seen your son get onto the
through the
premises
fence or something.
somehow. Yeah. And so he refuses to let the police search the power plant without a search warrant. Which the real reason he's keeping them from getting through that door is because there is a shitload of barrels of radioactive material sitting behind that door that he's trying to keep a secret.
Well, we're introduced to Ulrich's father, Trante, and we see him fiddling with his clothes and having a blood stain on his wrist, or presumably a blood stain.
And his wife remarks about it.
And
Well, I mean, yeah, because I guess that's Eric, right? That's Mads that he's handling, putting into that position where they find the dead body later on. Yeah, so, I mean, just episode 2 essentially really is a reveal. For some characters, we meet, middle-aged Jonas, and we start to see that, we have a couple suspicious characters that obviously we end up knowing didn't do anything to harm the boys, but there's a lot of mistrust going around in Vinden at this point in time because, they think a murderer is living amongst them. So shit starts to really unfold right off the bat in season 1. Alex, I don't know if you can think of any more like specific tidbits or like symbolisms in episode 2 that really like kind of reverberate throughout the series.
There's a couple fun things. Yeah. There's like Alexander has a great line to Jürgen Obendorf, who is the father of Eric Obendorf, who's been missing. Jürgen Obendorf clearly works at the power plant as like some kind of maintenance facility guy, essentially. And Alexander basically says, "You got to move the shit tonight." And Jürgen goes, "Well, I mean, like, people are watching me because my kid is missing. Are you sure it's a good idea?" And Alexander says, "Are you trying to blackmail me?" And he goes, "No, what do you mean?" And he says, "Do you know the difference between successful and unsuccessful people?" And Jürgen Obendorf kind of shakes his head and he says, "Exactly. So fucking move the things that I tell you to move and get out of my face." Which is such a savage line.
Just brutal. I want to get to episode 3 because I think this is one of the most important parts of the whole show, is where Helge gives Claudia the book A Journey Through Time, which, by the way, name of our show.
Eine Reise durch die Zeit.
Yeah, there we go.
We also see that book in the hooded stranger character's hotel room, so it kind of like bringing both of them into the same episode.
It's essentially the first time I think in the series that we not only see some person kind of be the result of time travel, but it's the first object that's introduced as the result of
as a paradox,
as the bootstrap paradox. It's the first idea I think that we see that's clearly a bootstrap paradox. Everything else has been human being related.
Yeah,
I think this is the first idea related, and it just happens to be a book that describes
what's going
time
on,
travel that's going on.
Mm-hmm. And for clarity, you're talking about the book being passed from Helga to Claudia in 1986, and the same book changing hands right between Jonas and like Stranger Jonas.
It doesn't change. We just see it in Stranger Jonas.
We just know that he has it. We see him with.
But yes, but it's in 2 different timelines, and it's the second time we see the same object. Right. And another thing, we also see Jonas finds maps of the cave in his father's studio.
Is that something that passed through time?
I don't know if it. I mean,
some aspects of it do, because the stranger comes in and marks like the path that he needs to go on to actually find the tunnel.
I'm surprised at the lack of substance in episode 4. Let me know if I'm wrong on that. I was just reviewing the.
Let me look at my notes for episode 4.
And I'm surprised because so far episodes 1 through 3 have had significant either people developments or object developments, such as the book.
Episode 4 introduces Noah meeting Charlotte.
Noah's.
Noah meeting Elizabeth.
Noah meeting Elizabeth.
We don't know Noah.
Oh, we don't know, but we don't know. We didn't see that interaction either. The Noah Elizabeth.
Yeah, we're only told by Elizabeth that she met Noah, but she knows what he looks like, so you have to kind of assume that she actually saw his face. Sure. But but he gives her the golden pocket watch that says for Charlotte on it, which is.
We do see an interesting interaction in that family too, because
the Elizabeth
get to see
Franziska interaction.
Elizabeth
Clearly
using sign
Franziska
language.
knows that Elizabeth is more conniving than her parents think.
Mm-hmm.
She's
And-
not as innocent as she comes
not
off.
as innocent as she comes off, which I think is an interesting thing you notice because you don't really ever see her being bad.
Would you say that she's sly like a fox?
with her little hat that she wears?
The wallpaper.
Oh, that wallpaper, baby.
Yeah.
That fox hat.
Another small detail
Oh wow.
is that Eric, when he went missing and the drugs that he had, he most likely got those from Noah, right? Because Noah,
He must have been,
Like,
right?
Oh,
Shit, is
had
Noah a
the
time
number.
traveling drug dealer?
he
Bartosz,
Essentially.
with and this is what I was talking about with Bartosz. You never see a transaction or him even possessing drugs from Noah.
Yeah.
Maybe once.
I don't know that Noah ever hands him drugs, though, does he?
But Noah is confirmed a drug dealer because Eric has drugs.
It is funny because Bartosz looks at that box of drugs, whatever it is, just like so intensely. Like, do you remember the scene where he's sitting on the couch and he's like looking at the box of drugs and he's like, he finds like the cell phone and shit, but he's like, kind of like,
it's
I love
there
that
is
he
a
tries to
black
punch
bag.
in the code for the cell phone.
Oh,
He's like,
yeah.
oh, maybe I'll get it.
He tries 1, 2, 3, 4 and then gives up.
It's worth a shot.
but yeah, I thought that was so funny.
Also,
He looked at it so intensely.
Every drug under the.
Oh, dude, it was
yeah.
it was like a
Oh, yeah.
sampler
Pills.
platter of any drug you could possibly
Dude,
want.
Noah has the good shit.
But well, another interesting thing. Okay, so I've watched the first season probably like 7 times, and only on the most recent time of me watching it, I thought to myself, who the fuck is driving the car that Noah is in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Noah's always in the back seat.
Yeah, but it could be Magnus and Francesca.
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
old
but who?
version.
But
think it's
who is
Adam.
it? Oh, I also had a note that Alexander's the only person who knows how to use umbrellas. Fucking every person in this show is like has their hood off and is just getting rained on, and
Constantly
Alexander's
drenched.
sitting there in an
It's a
umbrella.
sign of extreme
The
wealth.
budget for the umbrellas went straight to the rain machines.
Knowledge
and
of dryness.
Hannah rides her bike to the Nielsen's place with a platter of food. I want to know how she did that.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
impressive.
Held by the same person
That's
who
a really
drove the
good
car.
catch, right? Yeah. She has a unicycle.
Well, and also she leaves her bike there, and I mean, I just found it interesting 'cause she got a ride from Ulrich and leaves her bike there. But
There's also the scene where Jonas and Hannah are talking. Jonas asks Hannah if she thinks that he had any secrets, and she says, "Who, Mikkel?" And he goes, "No, Dad," which I thought was a fun little thing.
If we're still on episode 4, that is when Peter goes to see old Helga, right? And then I think old Helga tells him like TikTok, like it has to stop or something like that. Or maybe Peter says that to him. But I mean, that's a pretty important part of that episode, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
There's definitely some as things start to really hit the fan in the first couple episodes. Again, there's just mistrust, but this mistrust is what drives people to these extremes. Like there's again another idea of if everybody just told each other the truth, maybe these things wouldn't have unfolded the way they did. But since nobody trusts somebody else, they take things into their own hands and go to the extremes. We see it go as far as Charlotte telling Pete, her husband, like, "Hey, did you freaking kill these kids?"
Yeah, like where were you on the night that these guys
she's
disappeared?
the head of police is accusing her own husband of killing these kids. So it's
Alibi shit.
just complete chaos. It is shitty. I would suspect him too, honestly. The way
And
he's
also
acting.
his reaction to it. He doesn't say no. He says, "You're crazy."
Yeah, he says, "I can't believe
That's
you." would
totally
accuse
what I
me."
would say if I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a
Well, he
suspicious
was-
answer at all.
It's in his mind, the admitting that he's having a gay affair
Right.
is
It's as big as.
is bigger
Yeah.
than his missing
Right.
kid.
Than
Right.
admitting that he
In the
found a
community.
dead body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also in that episode, when Mikkel first goes back, the first place that he goes is the school to find his mom. And he actually does find her, but she's... Or
A
I guess he
terrible
goes
person.
home first and he
that's the
sees...
end of-
But that's
of
where he sees
episode
her,
The end of
right?
episode 2, he goes
Yeah.
and he tries to get into his house, the Nielsen house, and his key doesn't work, and then Ulrich opens the door and says, who are you? And Mikkel goes, I'm Mikkel, I live here. And he goes, yeah, I'm Ulrich, and I live here. Get the fuck out of here. essentially. But she's... When Mikkel goes and sees Katerina right before that, she's giving a cassette to, like, her friend, whatever girl that is, and says, like, it's a song about a girl who's wearing red lipstick, and a man kidnaps her because she's wearing the red lipstick and takes her into the forest and kills her. And then it immediately cuts to Claudia putting on red lipstick, and like
shit.
also in that episode, Elizabeth steals the red lipstick and then meets Noah in the woods.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting little references there.
Yeah,
What,
very
and this
cool.
this is episode 4 or 3?
That was actually episode 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Episode 4 is when Elizabeth disappears too with Noah.
Yes, yeah. So that actually is foreshadowed a little bit. What was the other thing? I had one more thing. Oh yeah, when Mikkel goes to the police station to try and find his father, and he finds Egon. Egon is already kind of biased against Ulrich, because when he says like my son, my brother, do you know Ulrich Nielsen? Like he works here, and he's like, oh, I don't think Ulrich will ever work here as a police officer, which was a little on the nose for me. But and then but the fun thing is when Egon leaves to go find Ulrich and figure out like why you sent this beat up kid to my station, Mikkel sees a like unsolved Rubik's cube on Egon's desk and like solves it immediately. So that's a fun little like.
Oh, I'd never noticed.
Yeah, that Egon consistently has this Rubik's cube on his desk that he never solves, and Mikkel figures it out immediately, and so that's kind of like the larger Egon never understanding the full scale of the time travel that's happening, but Mikkel understands it immediately. Oh, I wanted to mention actually that Tronte and Claudia are probably having an affair in the 80s.
Oh, definitely.
He goes and visits her, and there's a very like sexually charged scene between the two of them, and so there's a consistent theory that Tronte is potentially the father of Regina.
Yep, because we never know.
We never see Claudia have a husband.
And that would make Bartosz and Nielsen also.
Yes.
We have Jonas kind of starting to dig into things a little bit too. I think we haven't touched on this plot. Is Jonas is really becoming the professional traveler that he clearly ends up becoming in the beginning of season 1. You see how he searches for answers. You know, he's asking why did my father hang himself, right? Who is this strange man? He gave me these maps. He gave me this light that he says go to this point in the cave, and when I went to this point in the cave, lo and behold, I traveled through time. I believe the first time he travels through time, he sees his mother as a young version of herself
at the bus
at the bus stop,
it's the
riding
first
with
person
her,
he sees.
with his grandfather, and you can just see it on his face. He's so like just perplexed. Yeah. He's like, oh my God, is this what's going on right now?
Yeah.
And I love Jonas's honestly growth as a character in season 1, where he goes from this guy who you think is crazy, who, you know, poor Jonas, like he's so helpless, everything's going wrong in his life, to this person who just starts commanding time. He hops back to 1986, I believe is the year. Yeah. Hops to 1986, and then is able to handle that no problemo.
Well, he gets a little bit of help from future him too.
So imagine that scene, getting told that I'm you in the future, like you haven't figured it out yet. Or
that was at the very end.
Yeah,
when he confronts him, because it's outside of the hospital. Yeah. And because Jonas is trying to find Mikkel and bring him back.
Mikkel is speaking.
And that's when the stranger interrupts him and says...
He stops him from saying something.
He says, you can't bring him back. And because he sees him sitting there talking to Hannah, I think, right? Or is he talking to Enos, maybe?
Hannah...
Hannah is talking
Oh, that's right, because that's the whole
Mikkel,
thing with the moving of the bottle cap.
Yes.
Right. It's not
Hannah's Hannah. Talking to Mikkel, and the stranger, who we all know is Jonas, is telling younger version Jonas, like, that's your dad right there.
Yeah, whether or not you want to believe it, that is your father.
You have a choice right here. But Ulrich, lo and behold, finds his way to the past, and he finds himself into 1953, where he searches for Helge, because he wants to kill Helge in order to prevent the future murdering of his own child and the other children.
And his brother, too.
And his brother.
Right,
yeah.
because he doesn't understand the inability to change things that have happened within the loop, and so he thinks it's like a Back to the Future-esque style thing where he can just alter the past and it'll change his timeline of the future.
Like the separation in the response is Jonas calm, collected, thoughtful approach to it.
Ulrich rash, just I need where's my son?
Yeah.
Well, he's operating on so many assumptions already,
And he doesn't really know anything about Helga. He knows that he's connected in some way.
He thinks that he's connected in some way.
And
he really doesn't even know.
He doesn't know.
It's the same.
It's like if I just eliminate him.
He displays the same mentality too when he tries to get Mikkel back to the cave when he's older.
Yeah,
he literally just gets
The
busted.
parallelism of that too, the running to the cave and being tackled by Egon is in the trailer for season 3. There's a scene where Jonas is tackling Marta outside of the caves, and I think it's a very close symbolism there.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
Well, and the whole reason that that Ulrich had reason to suspect Helga as a suspect and that he was connected was because of Aegon Tiedemann's notes.
Why Forest Road?
Yeah, why not Forest Road?
Why
Why didn't he go? Why didn't he go the shortest way to get to his cabin?
Why did he take a detour the night that Mads disappeared?
Yeah.
And Aegon died before he could.
Helga never showed up to that meeting, and then.
And he actually shows up at Helga's house again. Or no, that was when he shows up and Helga
avoids him.
Yeah.
Doesn't.
Well, and then Helga gets in the car accident.
He never gets out.
Yeah.
Helga's in a car accident with his older self. And the older self dies.
Older self dies.
Also, the older self is driving a red car, and Helga is driving a blue car.
Oh, is it blue car?
I tracked all of the color symbolism.
I think it's the other way around.
Maybe it's the other way around.
One thing I totally forgot about that I think is very important to mention is that before Ulrich tries to kill a younger version of Helga, thank you, Colby, he goes to H.G. Tannhause's clock store.
Yes.
And he leaves an object there. What's that object? It's his phone, his cell phone, which powers the time machine.
Yeah.
It becomes instrumental in using the time. You have to have the key.
So there's another bootstrap paradox.
The future affecting the past.
Yeah, the future affecting the past.
Yeah.
And it's not person. Well, I mean, yes, he brought the phone, but it's an object. It's like technology itself is propelling technology, and which came first, right?
Right.
Which is interesting talking about the guard particle, because the phone was created by a person.
Yeah.
So it's not something that just comes out of nowhere. It's not. It was created with materials available to humans, created by a human, which is interesting in the implication of like the messing with time in this whole show. Is that if that is a functional, like one of the pertinent parts of a time machine, it was created by a human. So time machine is able to be harnessed in a way by humans.
This whole fucked up situation that is known as Vinden is the result of man-made time little loop.
Yeah, I think
and it's just the whole fuck show that ensues when people mess with time.
Yeah,
I think that validates Adam's belief that time can be harnessed.
Yeah,
and that because he has a tangible example.
Hey, he's lived it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
he's
lived. Yeah.
Not only has he lived it, but he's essentially changed it in certain ways.
Right.
Like
And then I think later in the same episode, the stranger Jonas goes to H.G. Tannhaus telling him, "I need you to fix this time machine," and the guy's like, shit, I have the same one right here, and it's instead of powered by, the device that you have, or the thing that powers your device, which is the same time machine, I have one that's powered by this odd object that this guy came and left, and he only left behind this crazy phone object thing.
Yeah, how's that phone still charged though?
Well, he actually hooks up a a battery to the back of it.
Does he?
You see it in season 2. He has like the back panel
that's
peeled
so
off of it, and he has
right,
like a
yeah.
whole
A
like
bunch of
battery
wires.
pack and wires. Yeah, he like figured out a way to like jerry rig it to
I think that's
continue working.
Jonas's
Reverse engineering.
first like introduction into like Ulrich's fate almost. You know, he sees the phone and you can see that middle-aged Jonas is like visibly like, oh shit, that's like Ulrich, and
from
like,
the background.
yeah,
of
from the
phone.
background.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
oh my god, like he was here. Like this is even more intertwined than I
Oh,
thought.
that's really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's learning stuff as he goes along as well.
Oh yeah.
And he's already middle-aged Jonah. But is it then that Claudia? Is it later that season that Claudia comes in and tells the watchmaker how to build the time machine?
She gives him the blueprints
In the
at the
50s,
in the
though.
50s.
Yeah.
She gives him the blueprints in the 50s.
Yes.
That's in
Is-
episode
but-
9, the very
yeah,
end of
yeah,
episode
yeah.
9.
That's
Yeah.
right at the end. Doesn't at some point don't we also see she says, "I'm not here to teach you how to build."
Right,
it."
you have to teach me how to use it, but I'll be the younger me essentially. She
Yeah.
doesn't say that, but
Which is
she
like
says,
kind of a meme.
And like she taught there's another passage of idea, bootstrap paradox with an idea of time travel. So not only the idea of time travel, but also like a physical result of it.
Well,
in
and then
the
they
book
talk
and the
about it
time
again.
machine.
Yeah, and then they talk
Yeah.
about it again in season 2. The younger her comes in and he like teaches her how to do it, and he's like, "You told me earlier to that."
Yeah, your older
older
self told my younger self that I would have to teach your younger
Younger
self
self.
this
Yeah.
shit. And the funny thing is, I would never have known how to do it until recently when some other guy came and told me how it all worked.
There's
Yeah.
an interesting little
Yeah.
connection to
So I
cover
think
everything
that
up.
must be the third or fourth time where we see the idea of time travel itself is a thing that traveled through time.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that self-referential aspect of this whole conundrum
Yeah.
is just what
Recursive.
makes it. It's exactly. It's recursive, but it's consistent. It's internally consistent, which I think makes the
Well, I
The
think
show.
that
Also, right when she gives H.G. Tannhaus the blueprints, all the clocks inside his shop are at 11:05.
yes.
show.
11:05
Wow.
constantly in the
That-
show.
yeah.
Wow.
When the
fantastic.
stranger and Tannhaus are talking about 33 years being the potential time difference between the planes of whatever, it's also 11:05 in the clock shop as well.
I never noticed that. I at first, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was a little crackpot theory, Alex. But
all over the
more
place.
and more you're saying it appears. I mean,
What if that is how Adam is
It's a
trying to
mirror.
keep the most important
It's a
parts
mirror
in
to each other.
sync?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Both
The
ticking
most
down
important-
to doomsday.
The most important things happen at 11:05, so it's really easy to like, if you can synchronize the,
I
if
went
you
through
can synchronize like the events happening, you can be like, good, the main fucking things happen at 11:05, so like whatever
I
changes.
did go through every episode
went
in
through-
season 1, and there's only really the one.
There's only a
episode
couple.
one.
I went through every
Gotcha.
episode in both seasons and looked at what was happening at 11:05 in each
Mhm.
episode, and it didn't really pay off that well. But there were a couple things that were interesting. I mean, obviously,
like in the show, the 11 minute and 5 seconds into it.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like in the first episode,
Oh,
Ulrich
wow.
says the word apocalypse at that second.
That's really the only one
Um,
that
I
missed,
mean-
at least.
In episode 10, Ines says like each time it happens, there's like
Single word.
there's like a pause right before
Mhm.
the thing that's said at 11:05, which is kind of interesting. Like there's almost always a pause right before it, and like a lot of them are kind of not really
Crackpot
anything.
theory.
Although like in episode 5, Katerina, who's wearing a red shirt, gets up and hugs Hannah, who's wearing a blue shirt, and that's when she right at 11:05 is when she does like the sniff
Yeah,
and
yeah.
realizes that like, oh,
That's
this is
significant.
yeah.
No, that is
Significant,
that
for
is
sure.
important.
You guys think it's interesting that the quote unquote creator of time travel, Tannhaus, we've never seen him test his invention. He's just a pawn.
He's a
Doesn't
middleman.
seem-
Mhm.
Doesn't
Oh,
seem
yeah.
like he has any motive.
Oh, man.
Claudia's
Well, and he also
pawn.
he
has
also
such an awesome
he
quote.
also seems very I can't remember when it happens. I think it might be the last episode of season 1. When like he's told that like it worked, and he's Hooded Jonas is trying to blow up the tunnel, he like tells H.G. Tannhausen, and Tannhausen is like, "Get out of here! I don't want to know anything about this."
Yeah, it's just
Like
Yeah.
he doesn't really
He's-
care
he's
about
like
the time travel.
He's like a pure intellectual in that
Yeah.
matter. He's got no.
But it's also the
ulterior
fact that
agenda
he
other
didn't
than-
really do anything. Like the book he didn't write because it's bootstrapped. The time
Right.
machine he didn't really create because
Mhm.
it's bootstrapped. I mean, so it's kind of like
Yeah.
interesting because he never actually did anything himself.
He profited
just
off of
the
the
TV
pawn
show.
show.
Yeah.
that is showing in that bunker.
Yeah.
That's where he's made his riches.
So Claudia, as a puppeteer, one thing I don't understand that happens in episode 10 is Noah tells Bartosz that Jonas is the one who is creating the wormhole. Claudia sent him in there telling him it would destroy it, but she knows that he's actually creating it. So I think
I have that entire quote if you want me to read
please,
it.
Yes.
that would be great.
Noah goes, everything is about to begin. The older Jonas will destroy the whole, but he doesn't realize that he will be the one to trigger its existence. The cesium in his useless machine won't destroy the whole forever. It's what creates it in the first place. He thinks he's a savior, but Claudia lied to him. Most people are nothing but pawns on a chessboard, led by an unknown hand. Their lives exist only to be sacrificed for a higher goal. Jonas, Mikkel, the children, they're nothing but unfortunate yet necessary chess moves in an eternal war between good and evil.
Boom.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
So Claudia, you're thinking Claudia like, oh, what a nice lady.
Mhm.
But then to you as an evil character, Noah is explaining, no. She's actually creating this effed up time travel loop, right? We are not the evil people. She is. It's the first time
Yeah.
I felt like, oh,
Totally
damn, like
subverted.
maybe Noah
Yeah.
is doing these horrible things for a
Maybe
good
they have
purpose,
some larger goal. Yeah.
larger goal in mind. Exactly, and to see Jonas, middle-aged Jonas, who's so experienced, be so deceived, also reminds you that right now Claudia is kind of a head person in as far as this whole time travel thing is concerned.
Right.
You think you're not introduced to Adam at this point, but you think
Right.
Noah's
So you
the
think
other.
Noah
Right.
and
Noah
the rest of that quote, actually, because there's kind of the back half of that as well. Noah is still talking to Bartosz, says, there are two groups out there fighting to control time travel, light and shadow. We belong to the light. Don't forget that. Even though some of what we do is of a dark nature, but no victory is ever won without sacrifice. As long as we're in this time loop, we who know have to make sure that every step will be repeated exactly as it was before. No matter how inhumane it seems to us, no matter what sacrifice it demands of us. But believe me, the others are the ones who are truly inhumane. They have lost all humanity. They belong to the shadow. Your grandmother, Claudia, belongs to the shadow. Never trust her, no matter what she says. Jonas trusted her before, and he will trust her again. Jonas thinks he will change everything, but he's just her puppet. He doesn't deserve any better.
Alex, I want to hear your kind of remarks on season 1 as a whole. Maybe some like.
Well, okay, so based on the last Noah quote that I read, where he's talking about light and shadow, there are two sides trying to control everything. in episode 8 of season 1, when the stranger goes to visit Tannhaus to talk to him about time, he shows up at the place at 11:05, and Tannhaus says, on time as always, like clockwork. So he always shows up at 11:05 to talk to Tannhaus, maybe? Who knows? But then they're talking about Einstein-Rosen-Bridge's passage that connects an entrance, a black hole, and an exit, a white hole, which we're seeing white holes in the season 3 trailers.
Yep.
Yeah.
In the alternate universe. So maybe that's the exit of whatever the black hole in our universe is. So
Yeah.
who knows what that means?
That would only support like 2 universes there, right?
Yeah, there's weird stuff there, but the real quote that I'm looking for here was from Tannhaus to the stranger. He says, our thinking is shaped by dualism, entrance, exit, black, white, good, evil. Everything appears as opposite pairs, but that's false. Nothing is complete without a third dimension, not just up and down, but a center as well. He introduces the triquetra, the Trinity knot.
Yeah.
And he proposes that a wormhole connects not just 2 but 3 dimensions, past, present, and future. But he uses the word dimension, which is interesting.
I love the quotes, Alex. Honestly, they provide such concrete evidence to certain theories within the show that I think it's almost, even though we're only through season 1, if you did watch hard enough and collected the key quotes, you could see that there's not only potentially another world, but 3 separate worlds going on, which, again, one of my favorite things about Dark is the consistency and the lack of plot holes. Because if you look hard enough,
everything is connected in some way. Everything is a reference to something else. I'm just looking at this episode. I wrote down sexy ass Agnes in a red dress and black hat when she meets Ulrich for the first time, and Tranta is wearing a blue jacket with a red shirt underneath. So that's interesting.
Another color.
Blue and red.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that are wearing multiple colors at times. Like Mikkel's pajamas in season 2 are brown, but there's red, blue, and yellow rocket ships that are flying to red or blue or yellow planets. There's so that's an interesting thing. Voller is almost always wearing like a blue shirt with yellow or red stripes. Like he's always got almost all 3 colors going for him, or he's wearing like a beige sweater.
Fashionable.
Well,
he was a good looking dude, man.
Alex, we can pick up on more color symbolism when we go through season 2 as well. No need to burst your bubbles early.
Fucking the dresses that that Agnes wears with Doris. She's wearing a blue dress, and yellow, she gives Doris that yellow dress. Yeah. Oh man, dude, so much red, blue, yellow.
In 2019, Noah tells Bartosz that Claudia is the real enemy, which we already talked about, and she has sent adult Jonas to unknowingly create the wormhole instead of destroy it. In 1953, young Helga awakes up as a wormhole appears in front of him in the bunker, connecting him. He sees Jonas through the portal, and Jonas is in 1986 at that point. And they reach for each other, and at that point, Helga is transported to 1986 to the timeline that Jonas was in, and Jonas is transported and wakes up in the post-apocalyptic 1952.
Yes.
And the I think the last scene of season 1 is where he gets hit with the gun.
Him getting rifle butted by Celia. Is her name. And
the translator.
The translator who
we don't know much about.
She looks suspiciously like young Hannah, though.
That's funny. Yeah.
There's a lot of.
Did not see that.
Yeah.
But,
she never gets a name throughout the entire thing too. Because I make sure.
The only reason we know her name is because of credits and stuff.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Celia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, and this is kind of not off topic, but Noah was talking a lot about, especially to Helga when he was in 1986, like during that time period, like we prefer, this is when he's talking to older Helga, adult Helga. He says,
why do we believe in God?
Yeah, like there is no God. We prefer a lie than feeling pain. And he says different, and like nothing is done in pain. Not a single breath, step, not a word, not any pain. All an eternal, wondrous series of pain. Sadness can give us strength. Pain defines who we are, but no longer holds power over us.
Well, that's interesting. That quote is different from the German translation.
I did the English version. Yeah.
Interesting. The quote that,
again, I'm lazy. I'm sorry.
The quote that I have, Helga says, because it's like middle-aged Helga, and he's questioning Noah because it's right at the end of the season, and he says, "But if there is no God, why do we believe in a lie?" And Noah says, because we prefer any lie to the pain. Noah talks about the stranger who visits him and like says the whole thing about nothing being. He says nothing is in vain, not a single breath, a word, a step, any pain. It's all an eternal miracle of the one. He didn't understand until years later when he felt the pain, that pain and horrible experiences make us what we are. And then he asks like, who's next on the list? And he says Jonas. And so that's when they go and get Jonas and put him in the bunker.
Kidnap him. Wow.
Splash.
Well, and that's also an allusion to season 2 because we find out that the person he heard in the hallways was Jonas in 1920, which we will talk about in season 2.
Maybe, because Jonas doesn't actually say that to him, so it's.
He said he hears it in his sleep. In this quote, he says that.
Well, yeah, that he would wake up and talk in his sleep.
Yeah.
So there are some theories that
It might not
Jonas
be
is not
Jonas,
the stranger, but that's what we're led to believe.
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
I'll give you that.
Jonas is definitely the stranger.
No, I mean the stranger that talks to Noah. I mean, but yes, I mean they
Okay.
call him the stranger. Realistically, yes, it's probably him. I had just about the very last episode when the stranger Jonas, middle-aged Jonas, is in the tunnel. He's using the machine and he's using the phone with it to like create the black hole or whatever
to destroy the tunnel that actually ends up.
But okay, one, why would that work? But it does. I mean, it does break the tunnel essentially, because then the tunnel isn't
But it doesn't
functional
break the
between
cycle,
the tunnel then isn't functional between November and June in all timelines.
Until the apocalypse, yeah.
Right,
Oh,
because
and
because
afterwards.
once because then he because
and most likely
Jonas
afterwards
goes in
because Jonas that gets trapped in the future. Oh, I guess that's
right. But I was just wondering, like, well, because then when he's sitting down there in the tunnel, he sees his father again, covered in that black paint, sitting with him. So that's just another recurrence of that. And I was thinking maybe if there's like an explosion in the tunnel when he's doing that, if that's what gets him all burnt up and causes him to be Adam.
Oh,
If we're
perhaps,
assuming that
yeah.
Jonas is Adam, maybe like there's an explosion when he breaks the tunnel, and that's what causes him.
Are we saying that the people are we
up.
saying that the person we see in season 2 is a different Jonas or a different adult Jonas?
Could be, if there's multiple universes.
Yes.
So you're saying the tunnel only gets destroyed in one universe? That's an interesting theory.
Maybe. I mean, well, that's the thing. Is the tunnel connecting 3 timelines in one universe, or is it connecting 3 universes?
Yeah, I would.
That's my wonder. Is if because the machine travels you forward and backward 33 years in time within your universe, seemingly.
Yeah.
But the tunnel, we're not necessarily sure of. I think maybe it does. It is just within the timeline, because I think there's some like specifics that do end up playing out where it had to have been within the same timeline. But there's going to be some way that one of the modes of travel, whether it's the God particle, the tunnel, or the Tannhaus machine, is going to be something that causes you to go across universes.
But there's also the question of what causes the tunnel to actually work. Because like the machine, you have to have the cesium. The God particle is the cesium. Like, I mean, and I guess it's like supposed to be right below it and stuff like that, and I get that. But what actually causes the tunnel to have that property? Is it just like the soil that's around it or whatever? Or like, because I mean, they're clearly building it in 1920 and it says there's still 32 years till it's functional. So
right.
Do they do something special to the tunnel, and that might be something that we learn?
Or is it just that's when it kicks off? Yeah, who knows? I mean, the whole scene where he's actually doing the destruction of the tunnel, there's a lot of really good stuff. I mean, Mikkel gets to, because it's all like in there's just a song playing and it's the montage of images of like whatever. Mikkel arrives at the Convald house for the first time and he like realizes, oh, this is like my future. I'm just going to be Michael Convald now. Charlotte finally goes and meets Peter in the bunker. So the idea is they're going to like finally share their knowledge together and start figuring it out together, which we see happen in season 2. Katerina is calling Ulrich's phone, which is the phone that's being used to destroy that's being used with the time machine. So I wonder if her calling that phone affects something.
Say, what are all these like? I think it's really good. Just like TV development is showing all of these shots side by side to create an illusion almost of, these are connected, but in reality, it's just like good filmmaking.
The next thing.
Do
I
we
think
enjoy these
like,
montages every episode?
Absolutely,
10 minute episodes.
Because the song that they play during those montages is always a fucking banger. So then after Katerina is calling Ulrich's phone, it then cuts to in Mikkel's room, and he's got that mobile that hangs from the ceiling of red, blue, and yellow planets, and they're all spinning. Yeah, I need like that.
Does that have like you think that has a relevance in any?
Yeah, it has something to do with all there's the whole spinning right round, and their ears are screwed up because of rotational centrifugal forces. So I think anything that's like spinning has to do with like the spinning of a wormhole or some kind of like black hole that spins kind of thing.
So in terms of like the fact that they're spinning, right? Mm-hmm. I can see that is true, right? Like one is spinning and so is the other. But in terms of like a more deeper connection, what is like the idea behind?
Oh, okay. So all the planets there that are on the mobile aren't just one color each.
Yeah.
Some of them one of them is like red and yellow stripes. One of them is like blue and red stuff. So like they're all kind of like intermingled in colors. They're not all separate colors entirely.
Yeah.
So I think the idea is that all three universes are kind of interwoven together and have like they're all twisted up in some big knot, in a trinity knot essentially.
If you're listening to this and thinking about doing a rewatch of Dark, especially season 1,
especially prepping for season 3,
focusing on in prep for season 3, really go back, rewatch some of the episodes, or all of them. I say all of them, to keep an eye out for those time matches that Alex has been mentioning, or those color matches that Alex has been mentioning. Keep in mind all those little hints that, yes, things are occurring on different timelines, but are they occurring in different universes?
Right.
And then these families, right? These four main families.
But it's kind of three.
It's kind of How intertwined are they, right? And how do they fit together perfectly? If you can imagine that this world is just a recursive loop occurring again and again and again. And we've given 100, if not more, specific examples throughout the show
of mirroring and repetition of certain themes.
Go back and watch those scenes, or just go back and watch the entire episode and season and both seasons, and keep an eye out for these themes.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also make sure you listen to the intro and outros, because those the monologues or whatever that are at the beginning and end of each episode have, it's not every episode, but the ones that there, they have very strong allusions to universes and the black holes and all the different.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, like, there are no wasted
because it's always
scenes
either Adam,
or words.
Helga.
There's no wasted dialogue. There's no wasted anything. Everything means something in the show.
It's always Adam, stuff. Helga, or someone who knows about the cycles talking and saying things that are very illusionary.
Yeah. Hopefully season 3 lives up to the expectations that we've set. I mean,
don't even say
high,
that. You know,
very high bar. I know we're
you.
watching it in almost one go, and we'll be coming at you live with some episode by episode reactions.
Sort of live.
But at the same time, like, please go watch these episodes again with these theories in mind. I'm sure you've heard them. If you haven't heard them, take a gander, see if you kind of agree or disagree. Please write back, letting us know if we missed anything, if we made an error, if we're not seeing something, or you have a different theory. We'd love to hear from you. And we're going to add it into the.
Yeah, I mean, we can drop it in. We can drop it in post or something.
Okay. I mean,
you can just say it like into your desktop microphone and say like, the Patreon, the whatever, the email.
We just might discuss your theory on here between us, and so.
Please send us emails and maybe we can talk about your specific things or look for them when we're watching season 3.
Absolutely. So, any final thoughts on season 1 recap?
I think I have said everything I could possibly imagine.
Sorry for the shitty mic quality, but here's the links. Our Patreon is ajtt.thedarkcast, darkast@gmail.com, and our Patreon is ajtt_thedarkcast as well.